Scott, welcome to DC. You've written a book, A Revolution of Common Sense, about President Trump's first 100 days. Mm-hmm. What does common sense mean to you?
Well, I wrote the book and titled it as such because when I was watching the president's inaugural address, he used that phrase, and I thought that would make a great title for a book. And so it really kind of encapsulates how he sees that he has rebranded the Republican Party and really the conservative movement. It's how he would say that he makes his decisions. I'm trying to do the common sense thing. On the 100th day in office, in fact, he took me with him to Michigan. We flew on Air Force One, and at a rally in Warren, Michigan, he said, whether you're left or whether you're right or whatever you are, it's just common sense. That's how he approaches his decision making, but really also how he is branding what he is trying to do with the country. So to me, also, if you'll look in the book and look at the chapters of the book, I tried to pick out the issues that sometimes I call 80-20 issues, where he's on the 80 and his political opposition is on the 20. And most people would just say, yeah, it's common sense to do it that way. You know, he's made a pretty good living in politics riding on those 80-20 common sense issues.
So you talk about how Donald Trump is redefining the Republican Party and what it means to be a conservative. He's built a unique coalition. How do you think we can maintain that coalition going forward? Donald Trump's not going to be on the ballot again. And he's really brought a lot of new people into the conservative movement, into the Republican Party. Looking at the successes of the first 100 days and what you've learned from writing this book, what's the path forward? How do we create a unified conservative movement after Donald Trump?
It's a really interesting strategic question, and as an electoral matter, one that remains as yet unanswered by the Republican Party. We've seen elections where people want to vote for Trump, but they leave other races blank. We've seen off-year or midterm elections where Republicans haven't turned out as high rates. He got more votes in every election he's been on the ballot, but Republicans have left some meat on the bone as it relates to attracting these voters. It's actually the number one tactical issue for the Republican National Committee, in my opinion. How do you keep these people that he's brought in? It's interesting. He's a two-term president. It's hard to replicate or recreate two-term presidents. I mean, who replaced Barack Obama? Who replaced Bill Clinton? You know, it doesn't happen very often that you get a third term following. It happened with George H.W. Bush, but even he couldn't replicate the magic of Ronald Reagan. So it's hard to replicate these folks who win 2 national elections and get as many votes as Donald Trump did. So the next person, whether it's J.D. Vance or whoever, and I strongly believe it'll likely be J.D. Vance, you shouldn't focus on replicating or trying to mimic Trump, but what you should focus on is the lessons that he leaves you. And the lessons, in my opinion, are authenticity and coalition building. As you mentioned, Trump's brought a lot of new people in, and he's been willing to invite people into the Republican Party who did not think of themselves as Republicans or conservatives. A lot of people voted for him who never vote at all or rarely vote. But there were specific issues they cared about. Some of it was MAHA, some of it was energy, some of it was just his attentiveness to the plight of working class Americans. And so the lessons you can learn here are important, but to try to mimic it or replicate it would be impossible. There's only one Donald Trump, and it's going to be impossible to replace him. But to keep the movement moving forward, you really, you have to think hard about what is it people want in their politicians these days. They want authenticity. They want to know that you care, and they frankly want to know that you understand what they're feeling about our political system. I mean, a lot of people voted for Donald Trump because they thought he was going to be a hammer against the political institutions that have failed in the eyes of many people, a great swath of America. So I think you take away the lessons and you think, I can't replicate the man, but I can learn the political lessons, and there are many to learn from him.
Interesting. Here at the Rainey Center, we work with state, local, and federal elected officials. We do a lot of leadership development work with emerging conservative national leaders that hold office and are looking to their future. You're talking about lessons from President Trump, just general political lessons. But in this first 100 days that you talk about in A Revolution of Common Sense, and you interviewed all the cabinet secretaries, what lessons do those leaders find here in how to execute on what they've promised their constituents when they run for office?
Tell you one thing I learned from the cabinet, and you learn this from all of them, some variant, you'll get a story from all of them about how quickly Trump expects them to move. He gives them an order. And the one thing I learned from him in the Oval Office is he's running the country. I don't know who was running it the last 4 years, but I know who's running it now. He's very hands-on with the cabinet, very hands-on with his management style. He's telling them what he wants, and he expects results, and he expects updates and reports. He expects operational movement. Now, one cabinet secretary said to me, "You're allowed to tell Donald Trump we're working on it one time. You don't get a second bite at that apple." And so, my lesson learned here, and I think a lesson for other elected officials is, once you decide what you're going to do, just do it. Don't let any grass grow under your feet. Just get going on it. And I think one thing I learned about Trump is that he knows he's got one term here left in a short period of time. So he put a lot of balls in the air in order to see how many he could get to go through the hoop. And he got quite a few through the hoop in his first year in office. The other thing I think, and this would apply to Republicans, is that you have to understand when you hold office, and Trump faces this, but even local Republicans would face this. There are entrenched interests that are working together to overwhelm you. Democrats, media, bureaucrats, and even in Trump's case, federal judges. You have these sort of people that are colluding to overwhelm you and stop you from making any progress at all. And early on, Trump made a tactical decision. I'm not going to allow myself to be overwhelmed. I'm going to overwhelm them. And part of the way he did that was to put so many issues in motion right out of the gate. And frankly, one reporter told me early on in the first 100 days, he's doing so much, we don't know what to cover. That was a sign that his strategy to overwhelm the entrenched interest was working.
There's more to your book than just the first 100 days. You talk about President Trump fighting for Western civilization.
Yeah.
And how he is standing athwart the gates. One of the things that I'm very interested in and that I've spent a lot of time working on recently is energy, and how that relates to the fight for Western values, for Western civilization, and whether we have a future that's about artificial intelligence for human flourishing or for subjugation. And what have you been thinking about this? I happen to think energy is the foundational issue, perhaps the most important right now. You looked at a lot of different issue areas. Which ones do you think are the most important to the future of Western civilization?
Well, I'll just pick up on your comments about energy to start. First of all, having a reliable electric grid, having affordable energy. I mean, this enables our civilization at all. It enables America. We're able to power the things that we want to do. And then to connect it to the other topic you brought up, artificial intelligence, I think the president fully understands this is his new Manhattan Project. It's his space race to win, and we cannot allow the enemies of the West to control the future of artificial intelligence. The way to control it is have the superior technology and have the energy to power it. And so the last chapter of the book is about energy, and there's a section of that chapter about the race to control artificial intelligence, the building of these data centers. But it really all revolves around whether we're going to produce enough energy. We could have the best technology and all the best intentions, but if we can't power that plus our electrical grid needs, that we have on a rolling basis, we're going to fall behind and we're going to fail. He fully understands that, and Secretary Burgum and Lee Zeldin and Secretary Wright, they all understand that as well. It came up in a lot of my conversations. Another part of the fight for the future of the West has to do with what I think is the mass migration crisis being faced down in several countries. Europe has been overrun in many ways, and they've sort of thrown in the towel in most of the places over there. We haven't. We were trying to under Biden, but under Trump, we put a stop to it. And we're starting to take a hard look about who's coming here, why are they here, what are they doing while they're here, who's on our college campuses, why are they fomenting anti-Western sentiment, anti-American sentiment. They don't have a right to be here. They're guests here. And so a lot of the book is also about immigration and migration. And what are we going to do to stand up for our civilization and our culture when you're bringing in millions of people who don't have any interest in assimilating? In fact, they have a strong interest in tearing down what we've built here over the last 250 years and what has grown up in what we call Western civilization over the last 3,000 years. So I think there's some larger cultural issues going on, but there's some very tactical things. Energy is one of them. And a president matters. Leadership matters. Which way you aim the federal government matters. Whether you choose to enforce the laws matters. We haven't passed any immigration laws since Trump became president, but we have had no border crossings in the last 5 or 6 months. We just had a change in enforcement. On energy, we're producing more energy. We're going to produce more energy still in the future, thanks to his leadership. And so These things, we're talking about them in the short term because of the policy decisions, but ultimately they may be Trump's biggest legacy. The things he put in motion today to win the AI race, to preserve our energy future, to control the mass migration crisis. The things he puts in motion today will pay dividends in 5, 10, 15 years, and we'll look back on it and say, thank God he won that election because we were headed down a really dark path.
So you have graciously reminded me that I'm from a border state, which is New Mexico, and you spent some time there. We both spent formative years in New Mexico working in politics. I would love to know something that you learned in New Mexico that has informed your work and how you approach being a political strategist and even a media voice.
Yeah, thank you. In 2004, I was shipped from Kentucky to New Mexico to run President Bush's campaign. I had never stepped foot in New Mexico. And when I got there, I had to learn everything from scratch. And that was the first year where we started to perfect what we used to call micro-targeting. Instead of targeting voters by geography alone or precinct data alone, we started to target them by household and by interest and by topic and by policy matter. And what I learned is that there are a lot of voters out there who absolutely will have a conversation with you about an issue they care about, even if they appear to live in a precinct that doesn't typically support Republicans, or even if it looks like on paper they're not terribly politically active. If you can find the right topic to engage someone with, and you can find the right engager, you can have a conversation. And we learned that lesson in 2004. Our pioneering of the micro-targeting, I think, allowed us to win a huge number of Hispanic votes in New Mexico. People who didn't look like traditional Republicans on paper. But I'll tell you one thing I learned. They cared deeply about whether their children were going to get a good education. And when we were sending people to talk to them who also had children, talk about the quality of schools and what President Bush expected out of accountability in our education system and No Child Left Behind, all of a sudden, people started showing up at the office who didn't appear on any regular Republican volunteer roles or whatever, but they thought President Bush was speaking to something that affected their life and the quality of their children's future. And that was a powerful lesson. I have never forgotten it. And Bush also had an authentic quality about him that I think appealed to a lot of populations in New Mexico and all over the country. In 2004, it's why he won the national popular vote. It's why Trump won the national popular vote in 2024. He had an authenticity about him that allowed him to talk to people who don't usually vote Republican. And so I can see some through lines in the lessons I learned in 2004 and to how Donald Trump ran his campaign in 2024. Very different kinds of guys, certainly, different backgrounds and communicate differently. But they both had an authentic quality about them, and they both had a knack for coalition building and bringing people in instead of excluding people. And sometimes in politics, I hear people these days saying we need to excommunicate this person or get rid of that person or, kick this person out. Politics is not the art of subtraction. It's the art of addition. And Trump knows it. Bush knew it in 2004. And the people who succeed in this business keep that lesson in mind. So I learned that in 2004, and I've never forgotten it. New Mexico was a beautiful place. I enjoyed it very much.
In your career, you've advised a lot of leaders, from local races to members of the U.S. Senate to U.S. presidents. What's one piece of advice that you would give leaders early in their career?
Well, we live in a communications forward environment, and it's great to know everything about all the policies and all that. And I wholeheartedly endorse being prepared. But you have to understand how to communicate with an audience. And you have to do it authentically. We're living, if you learn anything from Donald Trump, and if you learn anything from this book, it's that this man has moved our politics and really our media culture into a place where people demand and expect authenticity. They don't want to believe that you're only capable of just reading a script that someone just handed you. They want to know, do you believe this? Do you believe what you're saying? And, we can say a lot of things about Donald Trump, but no one's ever accused him of not telling us what's on his mind. That's how they want to see everybody that they're voting for, whether you're a governor or a state representative or a dog catcher. They'd like to know if you're authentically telling them the truth or authentically telling them your opinion, or if you're only capable of reading what some consultant put in front of you. And so my one piece of advice is understand you live in a communications forward environment. Authenticity is the coin of the realm. And the most authentic players in this game are going to have a high level of success. If all you can ever do is just read what someone else told you to say and you don't authentically believe it, people are going to sniff it out, and it's not going to go well for you.
Well, speaking of audiences, you've been traveling all over the country, meeting with your audience, from college campuses to bookstores to conservative donors. What conversations are you having? What are you learning from your audience and your readers as you go across the country to have this conversation about the revolution of common sense?
Well, there's a lot of interest in what Donald Trump is like behind the scenes, and I did spend some time with him in the Oval Office and down on Air Force One. And so I've been answering a lot of questions about what's he really like. And one thing I've learned from serving one president and having spent some time with this one and writing a book about him is that the caricature in the media of these Republican presidents is almost always wrong. That was my experience with President Bush. You know, he wasn't the way they portrayed him. And with Donald Trump, what I learned about him is that he's warm, he's funny, he's engaging, he's a good listener. He really enjoys listening to debates among his advisors. He asks good questions. And he's a good listener, and he takes in information, and then he makes decisions. He's pretty decisive in the room. And but it's never it's never the way you would think if you just listened to the media characterization of him. I found him to be, you know, solicitous, you know, hospitality minded. You know, in one moment, he offered me the hat off his head. He asked me, "Do you want my hat?" And I said, "No, but I know someone who does, my father, who's the first person to tell me that you were going to be the next president." And he said, "Sounds like a smart guy." And he signed a hat. And so I watched him, though, have these interactions with people. He's extremely gracious and hospitality focused. I just don't think you get that impression. So one of the big questions I get everywhere I go is, what's he like behind the scenes? And that's what he's like. He's very funny. He's kind of a professional towel snapper. But it's funny. It's not mean-spirited. It's actually pretty funny in the room. So I enjoyed getting to know him. I truthfully didn't really know him at all until February when I had that first meeting to pitch him on the idea of doing a book. And I was grateful that he said yes. And I delivered it to him on November the 17th, the night before it hit bookstores. And he loves the cover. Actually, I didn't know what to put on the cover. And so I sent him a message asking him, what's the favorite picture of yourself from the first 100 days? And that's the picture that came back of him walking out of the White House. And it's a cool photo. And you all were nice enough to put it on a cookie.
Cookie.
Hopefully the cookie is as good as the book is, because if it is, it's going to be delicious.
It's pretty impressive what they did there.
I can't believe
Yeah.
I don't even understand how that happened. But
We also made some swag to celebrate at our event tonight. Make common sense great again.
you know, that phrase common sense, the other thing I hear from people, look, there's a lot of political people out there who love to talk in political terms. But most Americans love the phrase and the idea of common sense. And most people like to believe that they could look at a situation and say, I could pick out the common sense thing here. And that phrase has deep meaning, I think, for people. There's a lot of folks who don't think of themselves as overly partisan, but they love the idea of being affiliated with a political leader who's just trying to do the common sense thing. That was some of the genius of the Trump branding. And so another thing I hear as I've been traveling around, I hear people adopting the phrasing, like they're using the phrase common sense in their regular political conversations. You can tell the branding is sticking out there. And I don't think that'll be one of the enduring sort of political legacies of Trump, kind of giving the Republican Party the idea that, hey, we're the common sense folks. And then by definition, our opposition is the uncommon nonsense folks. And that's a pretty bright line in politics.
Well, Americans have been searching for common sense ever since Thomas Paine. So perhaps we have finally found it with this president in this book.
We quote Thomas Paine right in there, and we're grateful for his contributions to the phrasing.
Where can friends of the Rainey Center and Common Sense find your book, and where can they find you?
Thank you for asking. You can get this book wherever you get your books. Amazon is popular. You can download it on Audible. I recorded it myself, which I enjoyed doing. But you can walk into a bookstore, Barnes & Noble, wherever, and pick it up. And where can you find me? Ubiquitous Presidents on social media. America's favorite pundit is at Scott Jennings KY on X and YouTube and Facebook. And I try to keep people updated with my clips and appearances on there. And I'll be doing a lot of book signings. And so if you happen to see me out in your neighborhood, I'd love for you to stop by and I'd be glad to sign it.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, Sarah.